There is a certain quiet that settles when a story begins not with declarations, but with the soft weight of a book being opened in a still room, where the air seems patient enough to hold what follows. The first of these impressions belongs to the autogun, a weapon whose simplicity defined its authority on the field. Built around a straightforward mechanical cycle that drove metal through rifled steel, it set the basic cadence of infantry warfare, a measured percussion that overshadowed strategy with its unbroken insistence. Its purpose was never tied to elegance or spectacle. Instead, it offered reliability in conditions that consumed more delicate devices, enduring grit, dust, and structural debris with the same stubborn efficiency. In the hands of soldiers pressed into trenches, ruined corridors, and exposed plains, it became a form of grounding, the recoil binding operator to terrain, in a way that made each shot feel like both an answer and an affirmation of presence. Its impact was not merely physical. Bursts from an autogun created corridors of pressure that forced opponents behind cover, not through overwhelming force, but through a relentless repetition that carved doubt into even hardened fighters. And though its design lacked refinement, it shaped the psychology of engagements by giving every infantry unit the means to assert control over distance and momentum, establishing a foundation that heavier and more specialized weapons would later echo and expand upon, always returning to the autogun's essential logic of survival through dependable fire. From the steady cadence of the autogun, the logic of the battlefield naturally narrowed toward weapons built for closer pressure, where distance collapsed and the air thickened with dust shaken loose by walls, footsteps, and ricochets. In those constrained spaces where corridors forced fighters into direct lines of movement, and cover became a fleeting advantage rather than a guarantee. The stubber emerged not as a refinement, but as a deliberate condensation of force. Its compact frame and rapid mechanical rhythm shifted the tone of engagements, producing a harsher, more immediate percussion that filled every recess with the sense of momentum pressing forward. Unlike its larger cousin, the stubber did not seek balance or moderated recoil. It pushed its operator into a stance defined by tension, bracing, and the instinctive alignment of body with the weapon's demand for control over brief but decisive bursts. The short barrel and swift cycling mechanism allowed it to saturate confined environments with fire thick enough to break assaults before they fully formed, turning narrow passages into shifting boundaries of noise and fragmentation. In urban ruins or compartmentalized interiors, the stubber shaped behavior more than terrain did, forcing opponents to consider not only cover, but timing, since even a moment exposed to its sweeping arcs could disrupt entire advances. Its rounds lacked the penetrating authority of heavier models, yet their density and speed created a psychological barrier, reminding anyone on the receiving end that proximity itself had become an adversary. The stubber's value lay in this immediacy. It transformed the chaos of close combat into something governed by short, decisive waves of suppression, giving infantry a tool that rewarded boldness without drifting into recklessness. A machine whose compact violence filled the gap between sustained volleys and the fractured uncertainty of close-quarter encounters. From the compressed violence of the stubber, the battlefield's demands expanded again, as if the very terrain pushed for something heavier, steadier, capable of holding a line rather than merely disrupting it. That shift gave rise to the heavy stubber, a machine whose presence altered not only the soundscape of a fight, but the posture of those who relied on it. Its reinforced frame and extended barrel produced a deeper, more resonant rhythm, each burst carrying the weight of sustained intent rather than hurried reaction. The weapon anchored itself into the environment turning rubble piles into firing nests and vehicle hulls into stable platforms, projecting force across open ground with a density that made movement costly for anyone facing its direction. What distinguished it was not simply power, but duration, the ability to maintain suppression long enough to dictate when opponents could advance, retreat, or merely breathe between impacts. In its arcs of fire, infantry found a way to reshape the tempo of conflict, slowing some engagements to a crawl while accelerating others into decisive breaks, all through the unbroken mechanical certainty of a weapon that refused to yield once its barrel settled into place. From the grounded authority of the heavy stubber, the progression of force naturally pushed toward a design that could pierce what suppression alone could not breach. This shift materialized in the autocannon rifle, a weapon that carried the familiar logic of kinetic fire, but magnified it into something capable of tearing through light armor and fortified cover with deliberate precision. Its elongated chamber and reinforced housing shaped every shot into a sudden, concentrated surge, a single mechanical pulse that traveled farther and hit harder than infantry weapons were traditionally expected to reach. Unlike the sweeping patterns of support fire, the autocannon rifle created narrow corridors of inevitability, cutting through plating, bulkheads, and improvised shields with a momentum that forced opponents to reconsider even the stoutest positions. Each discharge marked a point where resistance thinned, where angles opened, where the environment itself seemed to fragment under the insistence of a round designed to break more than posture. In the hands of trained operators, it became a tool not of volume but of certainty, a way to impose structural change on the battlefield with a handful of calculated impacts rather than prolonged exchanges. As the sharp, singular authority of the autocannon rifle carved its lines through armor and cover, the battlefield revealed another need, not for heavier impact, but for uninterrupted momentum, a stream of fire capable of overwhelming reaction before it fully formed. This demand shaped the rapid-fire autogun, a weapon that abandoned measured cadence in favor of a relentless mechanical surge. Its cycling mechanism tuned to deliver bursts so dense they blurred into a single continuous thread of pressure. It did not rely on precision or isolated moments of force. Instead, it filled spaces with an unbroken flow that eroded confidence and destabilized formations long before physical damage took hold. In tight advances and sudden pushes across exposed terrain, the rapid-fire autogun became a tool of acceleration, allowing units to seize initiative through sheer persistence of fire. Its presence reshaped movement itself, turning hesitation into vulnerability and rewarding those who understood that speed, when backed by constant suppression, could fracture resistance more effectively than any singular shot. From the ceaseless momentum of the rapid-fire autogun emerged the realization that sustained pressure required not only speed, but mechanical endurance, a way to keep the tempo consistent, even when heat, debris, and stress conspired to slow lesser weapons. This led to the rise of the chain autogun, whose defining feature was not the ferocity of its rounds, but the rhythmic reliability of its internal chain-driven system. Each cycle followed a guided mechanical path that resisted jamming, absorbed irregularities, and maintained a steady firing pattern long after conventional actions began to falter. The sound it produced differed from the sharp percussion of earlier models. It carried a deeper, more deliberate churn, as if the weapon announced its intent to outlast both operator and opponent. In prolonged engagements, this consistency became a strategic force of its own, enabling suppressive arcs that shaped the flow of combat and denied adversaries the chance to exploit fatigue or mechanical lapse. where other weapons demanded caution as firefights stretched on. The chain autogun pushed forward, turning endurance into its primary form of dominance. As the chain autogun established its presence through endurance, the battlefield revealed situations where longevity alone was not enough, where suppression required not merely consistency, but simultaneous coverage across converging angles. This necessity shaped the emergence of the twin stubber, a paired configuration that doubled not only the volume of fire, but the psychological pressure exerted on any force caught within its overlapping fields. The twin barrels worked in parallel, their rhythms intertwining into a dense mechanical weave that erased safe paths and punished hesitation with immediate converging bursts. Mounted on light vehicles, firing platforms, or fortified positions, it transformed small units into anchors capable of halting advances through sheer saturation, turning crossing points and narrow grounds into contested zones where movement became an act of risk rather than intent. Its value lay less in raw penetration than in the way it dominated space, forcing the enemy to split attention, break cohesion, and navigate a landscape defined by intersecting lines of suppression. In these moments, the twin stubber became less a weapon of opportunity and more a mechanism of denial, shaping not just what opponents could do, but what they dared to attempt. From the intersecting arcs of the twin stubber, with its dominance over fixed positions and choke points, emerged a contrasting requirement, born in the shifting momentum of assaults, where speed replaced entrenchment and every second carried the weight of breakthrough or collapse. This tension shaped the assault autogun, a compact, aggressively balanced weapon built to move with the operator rather than root them in place. Its shortened frame and recalibrated recoil allowed it to be carried through debris-filled corridors, breached walls, and unstable platforms without losing control or rhythm, turning mobility itself into a vector of force. Unlike suppression-focused designs, it delivered focused bursts that aligned with the pulse of advancing units, striking quickly to fracture immediate resistance before slipping back into motion. The weapon thrived in transitional spaces where fight and movement overlapped, its presence reducing the hesitation that often accompanied rapid entries or sudden shifts in direction. In these environments, the assault autogun acted less as a separate instrument and more as an extension of intent, enabling fighters to impose direction on the battlefield even when terrain and circumstance resisted, making speed and impact converge into a single, coherent pressure. From the restless advance shaped by the assault autogun, another need emerged, quieter but no less decisive, born in the moments when movement slowed and the battle hinged not on momentum, but on the ability to place a single round exactly where it would matter most. This shift gave rise to the precision autogun, a weapon that refined the familiar mechanics of its lineage into something tighter, calmer, and tuned for deliberate intent. Its reinforced barrel and stabilized firing assembly dampened the tremors of adrenaline and environment, allowing operators to draw narrow lines across shifting distances where targets were exposed only for fractions of a moment. Unlike broader sweeping variants, it did not seek dominance through volume or speed. Instead, it offered clarity, the kind that cut through dust, smoke, and fractured cover with rounds that traveled truer than their modest size suggested. In contested mid-range engagements, where neither side could afford waste or miscalculation, the precision autogun shaped decisions by making opportunity tangible, granting infantry a tool that translated patience into advantage. Its value was not measured in the noise it produced, but in the small silences that followed its shots. those brief, controlled interruptions where the balance of a skirmish shifted almost imperceptibly toward the one who understood how to slow the world for just long enough. From the quiet exactness of the precision autogun, the progression of kinetic arms returned once more to the realm of endurance, to the kind of weapon that did not seek finesse or speed, but the simple promise that it would continue to function long after circumstances stripped everything else down to exhaustion and grit. This brought the reinforced stubber into the line, a familiar shape rendered heavier, steadier, strengthened through materials and ammunition meant to resist the slow erosion of heat, dust, and the ceaseless strain of prolonged engagements. Its firing pattern did not aspire to elegance. It imposed itself through permanence, each burst carrying the sense that the weapon had been built for battles where retreat was impossible, and where the only certainty lay in the machine's refusal to falter. In defensive nests, on armored hulls, or pressed against the broken outlines of makeshift cover, it became a quiet assurance that a line could hold even when everything else thinned to its breaking point. Its rounds were not remarkable for their shape or velocity, but for their resilience, cutting through interruptions that would choke lesser mechanisms and maintaining a rhythm that barely wavered even as the environment collapsed into noise and debris. And in that steady persistence, the long chain of kinetic evolution found its quiet conclusion, not in triumph or spectacle, but in the simple presence of a weapon that endured as long as hands remained to guide it, letting the final traces of battle settle around its cooling frame until the field itself grew still once more